Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Armstrong. I'm the president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport here in North America. And we're really delighted to host today's webinar. And so on behalf of our 4 other partner organizations that have arranged today and developed the program, I want to welcome all of you. And I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Barry Kirk from Cavco. Barry?
Thank you, Bob, and welcome to all of you from me. As Bob said, I'm Barry Kirk with Cavco, and we help organizations get ready for the era of connected and automated vehicles. The background is that Canada's supply chain needs significant work, and automated freight is part of the solution, and today we want to dive into that. I'm really pleased that 5 different organizations have come together to jointly organize this webinar, and we'll hear from all of them later on. One is AIoT Canada, Cavco, my company, Intelligent Transportation Systems Canada, sometimes known as ITS Canada. As Bob said, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in North America. We often say Siltner, and then Vitesse. I'm also pleased that Walter's company, Praxium, has joined with Cavco to sponsor this webinar. So thank you, Walter. The objective today is to start to develop synergies between 5 distinct but overlapping ecosystems: artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, intelligent transportation systems, and connected and automated vehicles. So, Rebecca, could we have the speaker's slide up, please? There we go. Today, we're very pleased indeed to welcome 9 speakers from those ecosystems. Here they are. This includes our keynote speaker, I'll come to in a minute, and 2 guest speakers, one from the US and one from the UK. And I will, in fact, introduce each one individually immediately prior to their presentations. Next slide, please. This is today's agenda. There are 4 different panel sessions. The first is the keynote with Shannon. Second, a panel on what are we doing in Canada or should be doing in this space. Third, we're going to look at the international scene with the presentations from the UK and the US. And finally, I'm going to join with my co-organizers, and we're going to have a discussion at the end about next steps, possible next steps to keep the momentum going. And as we go through all of this, please send in questions as and when they occur to you. The chat box, as some of you have discovered, is locked, so please use the Q&A function. And if it's relevant, please tell us to whom the question is directed. So, thank you. So moving on to the keynote speaker, I'm very pleased to welcome Shannon Hamilton. She attended Queen's, McMaster, and the Schulich School of Business at York University. She's held a range of positions at various technology companies. She's the VP Sales for Radar at BlackBerry, and her presentation is entitled Freight as an Ecosystem, the Connected Road Ahead. Shannon, over to you, please.
Thank you, Barry, and good day to everyone who's joining. I'm going to share a couple of slides here just to kick us off. So please let me know if we are seeing slides.
We are.
Super. So just to add on to what Barry said, my career has really spanned a number of different industries, but first and foremost, I like to think of some of the work that I've done as really being at the forefront of disrupting traditional business processes with technology. I've also worked in the last few years with the Blockchain Supply Chain Association, and I really see such tremendous opportunity for all of us as we're thinking about automating freight and leveraging some really amazing technology as we move forward. So what I'd like to do is just introduce everybody to what I think we're going to be able to consider as we dive into today's agenda. Just wanted to make sure again that everybody's seeing my slides.
Yes.
Perfect. So not surprising, we have a very complicated and vast multimodal transportation network across Canada. And while I think it might be easy to think about freight moving over the road when we think about connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, there's actually a number of different modes of transportation that we need to be considering as we think about the future of automated freight. With the emergence of technologies like AI and data analytics, and we're going to talk today a little bit about the different areas and opportunities for the different ecosystems that Barry mentioned, IoT devices, as an example, have continued to explode. And what this is doing within transportation, if we look sort of at what's been happening in the last few years, in 2018, it's estimated that about 7 billion IoT devices were connected. That's grown to 27 billion in 2019, and the statisticians would suggest that we've got about 130 new IoT devices being connected every second. So this is creating billions of data points. It's estimated that by 2026, which is really only a few years away, that there could be over 1 trillion devices that are connected. And the opportunity for us is to figure out how can we leverage the sensors and the data to really help improve and automate the freight movement of goods across Canada and globally. But we have to start somewhere. And really the approach that I like to take as I've been kind of working at this cross section of supply chain, transportation, and finance for the last few years is we have to crawl before we can walk and run. And I know Barry and I were chatting about that, but to frame this and how we should be thinking about breaking down these ecosystems is understanding that we have an industry that it traditionally has been slightly resistant to change, in my opinion. About 1/4 of transportation companies today, unfortunately, don't own a digital strategy or a transformation initiative internally. What this means is we have a lot of work to do, both in building the skill set for the folks working within the industry. I read a recent report that half of logistics executives have expressed that there's a lack of technology skills across the supply chain and transportation. So we need to be thinking about building skill for the future, and we need to help, I think, organizations, and this is really a great start with this discussion today, on how data and information can be used to improve the movement of goods. And how can we use all of that great information to really start impacting all of the individual processes within the transportation and freight ecosystem. So I like to think of, today is we're at that bit of a crawl stage, although there's some emerging cool projects that are taking place. But if I step back and we look at global trade and shipping as an example, a lot of our freight processes are still grounded in paper documents and manual processes. There's a really interesting stat there that you can digest around what the Boston Consulting Group suggests are the number of participants and the number of data fields that are needed just as one step in the trade financing process as it relates to freight. Why I'm sharing that is because as we think about the road ahead and we think about the massive amount of digital transformation that's going to take place, we have to work at a lot of our embedded processes within transportation in order to really truly get to an autonomous place, which would, in my opinion, be you go from crawl, walk, run to fly, which would be, seeing us use more of that autonomous technology. But specifically, leading the connected road is IoT, autonomous vehicles, platooning, and these are really going to be key enablers to the digital transformation, supported by things like AI, machine learning, and Web 3.0. So I kind of liked this meme because, in my sphere of supply chain and asset visibility and freight and transportation, the IoT data and the data itself really isn't the answer to the question of just where are my goods. As we dissect transportation and we talk more today about supply chain, it's really picking apart all of the aspects that are involved in transportation and really marrying and lining up the data so that people can truly understand and get value out of all of the technology that we are faced with today. In our own backyards, some of you may know that I also lend my time to the Blockchain Supply Chain Association. In my previous life, I've had the opportunity to work at the forefront of blockchain and IoT. And we need market leaders. In this case, it's Walmart and Bison Transportation. I'd be happy to talk about this in more detail, maybe in a future conversation. But we need to look at our own backyard around the convergence of how these technologies within freight and transportation are actually starting to create some transformative benefits. There's also a lot of learnings about the fact that it is an ecosystem of parties that we're connecting. There's a lot to be thought of in terms of change management and adoption and how to actually support the organizations across Canada who have disparate systems and varying degrees of technological sophistication. And how can we bring them along in this journey of automated freight and transportation? There's been a lot written about supply chain and what the impact of COVID has had on supply chain. And what I will say as we go forward and listen to more of the agenda is that, we're not thinking about supply chain anymore as a linear process where step one leads to step two, that leads to step three. And I think there's been a lot of focus on the circular nature of supply chain. But coming out of COVID, I think what we're starting to realize and appreciate is that there is a bidirectional, multifaceted group of folks within the supply chain that all need to be working together as an ecosystem in order for us to really kind of move our automated freight network forward. And so really, I'm excited today, as Barry mentioned, we've got a convergence of technologies. I truly don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution to how we're going to achieve kind of autonomous freight or automated freight. But I think as we dissect logistics, IoT, AI, and machine learning, and how they can really help us get more predictive insights and move from reactive to proactive, coupled with intelligent transportation and autonomous vehicles, it's going to be the sum total of these areas that are really going to take us to the next level. So I hope this is kind of giving you some food for thought as we think about how we're going to digest the information that we're going to hear next. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of exciting work being done here in Canada, and I can't wait to hear how the other speakers are diving into this in more detail.
Well, Shannon, thank you very much. That was very interesting. It's a really good opening, a keynote, which is what I was hoping for. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, so let me give you a question, please.
Yes.
And, yeah, I know you're with BlackBerry. I don't want you to give away any secrets, but what do you see as potentially BlackBerry's role in this whole super ecosystem in the future?
Great question. Thank you, Barry. I think security and cybersecurity is one of the areas, particularly because of the trillions of data points that I mentioned that are going to be upon us in the next few years. We really need to make sure that the parties that need to access data can and should, that we eliminate any bad actors. So I see us continuing to play a leadership role in that space. And I also think as we lean into not only the automation of vehicles, but really connecting the goods component, the what's being moved with the vehicle and the how transportation is happening. I could see us continuing to play a leadership role in bridging those data points and obviously continuing to leverage our IoT presence.
Yeah, wonderful. Sounds good. I look forward to watching this happen in the future. And before we finish, Shannon, just a quick comment here. Um, you know, thank you for highlighting that location of vehicle freight is of limited interest and use. The key, as you pointed out, is predictive ETA, no surprises.
And contextualizing the beyond location. I hear a lot of, I don't need dots on a map. I think that's, it's been a novelty and something that we've appreciated. But it's really more understanding how you can use that information inside some business processes to be able to better manage, optimize, and improve the sharing of information with all the supply chain partners.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Shannon. That was a great start. Let's move on to the second panel, where we look at explore some of the activities in this space in Canada. Again, feel free to pose your questions as we go through all of this. The first person to speak is Bob Armstrong. He's the owner and leads Atlas Trade and Logistics. And as you heard earlier, he's the president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in North America. And his presentation is on the state of our supply chain today. Bob, over to you, please.
Thank you, Barry. I'll be brief, but I just give you the highlight. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly renewed interest in supply chains. It's on the news every day. And you have to couple that with the pandemic effects with weather and other climate disruptions. And the supply chain became a mess. And the key issues, of course, are congestion, lack of capacity at ports, terminals, rail yards, highway. Everything is about uncertainty. I'm going to just talk about 3 or 4 of these issues. And infrastructure, it's no surprise. A lot of our issues were there before the pandemic. They just got exasperated by it. So consumers that began spending more and more while they stayed home, they spent huge dollars on online purchasing, which meant more and more goods were coming from outside of Canada, predominantly Southeast Asia, arriving by ship into Vancouver and Prince Rupert and other ports in Eastern Canada. The reality is the ports became congested. There were too many ships coming all at once. They sat out in harbors waiting to be unloaded. Then that created a reduction in ship capacity to the effect that our exporters weren't getting empty containers inland because the container lines wanted them to stay at the ports and go back on ships. So our exporters were bogged down in getting their exports out, which makes our manufacturers and our exporters unreliable in the global market. So the reduction in capacity, sky-high container prices went from 5,000 to 30,000, have dropped down. They dropped down quite a bit, but they're still higher than they should be. So increased capacity needs to handle more containers at the ports. So capacity is a huge issue, port congestion. It's backed up all the way now. For example, there isn't a warehouse in this country that isn't full. The ports are even phoning people, asking them to come and get their containers because they got nowhere to put them. In fact, if you look in fields all over the place, there are containers. Railways and terminal operators have been renting land to store containers that are going to get frozen into the ground pretty soon when our winter hits. The second serious issue is labor. Labor is, in fact, a huge issue. A shortage of skilled workers. Manufacturers couldn't produce on time because they had short work. Everybody's got a labor issue. And this is why today's webinar is so essential to me to get the word out about automated freight. And we'll hear that from some of our other speakers, but that can speed up the process. If you're going to be short labor, then automated freight can be a great answer to alleviating some of this problem. And then the third issue, and Shannon really touched on this, talked about it, it's data. COVID revealed very much that there's a serious lack of data transparency in transportation. Shippers themselves, they need reliable data to make a transportation system decision. You can't make it without it. And so what we really need to change in our supply chain, it's, first off, it's a network of independently operated yet interrelated entities. So what we need to do is we need to create a connected, resilient, and efficient supply chain system. And that word connected is vitally important. So digitization and the like, all these issues that are going to make our supply chain more efficient and more fluid is what Canada needs and needs now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. That's great. And I see some questions coming in, and I'll leave them for now, but they're just to the left of my screen, so we'll come to those. Next to speak is Walter Knittel. His background, by the way, includes Ericsson and Nortel. He is currently the CEO at Praxium. He's also a board member at AIoT Canada. And his presentation, as you can see there, is the AIoT ecosystem lays a foundation for automated freight. Walter, over to you. Walter, you're on mute.
Thank you, Barry.
You're welcome.
Before I delve into the AIoT ecosystem imperative, I want to level set everyone about what we mean by AIoT. And that begins with kind of a 101 of the Internet of Things. Obviously, the Internet of Things consists of things or devices connected over the Internet to each other and to data centers where the data is stored, managed, analyzed to create value. And they're connected over a variety of different media, including 5G, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, and others. So that's in a nutshell in the Internet of Things. So as we see, it goes from devices to the network to analytics. But is that all there is to IoT? Well, it's one piece of the whole IoT space. It's really just the architectural piece, the bits and pieces. It's part of an overall IoT space, which also includes the verticals, the solutions where the value is created. And by that, we mean, the smart cities, the smart buildings, precision agricultures, and a whole waft of other different verticals. It also includes enabling and impacted disciplines and technologies that make it all happen, like hardware and software innovation, security. There's even socioeconomic implications of IoT. So this is the whole IoT space. And if you look at the topics that we're talking about today, automated freight, connected transportation, logistics, they fit into the IoT space in that verticals dimension. Okay, so that's IoT 101 in a nutshell. So where does AI come into all of this? Well, clearly AI comes into the analytics, but not just there. It comes into the network as well. AI makes networks more resilient, more reliable. It comes into cybersecurity and privacy, making sure that we're safe and secure. So basically, it comes into all parts of the IoT space, without which, if you separate AI and IoT, you don't have value. You create value by merging the two together. So that's where the term AIoT comes from. Okay, so let's get into a little more detail about where IoT is applied in the context we're talking about. So AIoT is applied in container geolocation, for example, sensing the freight, what's the temperature? Is the temperature right? Is there excess vibration, motion, moisture, all that kind of sensing. It comes into play with into automation of loading and unloading, distribution, checkout, and a bunch of other things, including physical access and control, and also in managing and monitoring operators and drivers. AIoT also has a play in risk mitigation. So clearly, if you have the proper transportation, you mitigate any kind of perishable spoilage, or you prevent damage or theft, mislocation, and you enhance resilience by maybe rerouting transportation or preventive maintenance of the equipment or the vehicles that you have. Similarly, on a smaller scale, we're talking about delivery robots or drones, similar kind of applications, freight geolocation, freight sensing, human sensing and avoidance. So you don't want robots bumping into people on the sidewalk. And of course, a number of risk mitigation functionalities and risk and resilience enhancements as well in this space here with the drones and the robots. Okay, so who are the players in Canada that are in the AIoT space? And there's a whole raft of them, right? Here's just a small sampling. Some of them are in the architecture space, some of them are in the vertical, some of the domains, some of them are overlapping. The question is it a cohesive community and mutually supportive? And the answer is maybe not. And that's where AIoT comes into play. AIoT Canada is a nonprofit organization. We foster economic growth through innovation and accelerated adoption of AIoT. And we do that through connecting our members together, learning events and member meetings. We have a very nice portal on the web, but most importantly, we want to bring industry, government, and academic stakeholders together to develop a national AIoT strategy. Our three pillars that are in our mission are to federate our industry, basically be a voice for our industry, support our industry to help develop innovating products, and also drive market adoption in 12 identifiable verticals, which includes transportation and logistics. So we recognize that AIoT has economic value. The question is, how do we leverage it? We need a national AIoT strategy. And to that end, we held a roundtable in May, bringing industry leaders together to help us. And we have three questions. One is, what are the opportunities for AIoT? What are the challenges in addressing those opportunities? And what are the solutions to overcome those challenges? You don't have to read this, but they came up with answers. It's notable that one of the verticals they selected is connected transportation. This is their choice. And they came back with a number of challenges, but I want to highlight one important one, and that's the heterogeneity of the whole thing, meaning it's scattered all over the place. IoT is a big space, multi-technologies. There's some lack of standards, lack of regulation and governance around there. There's an apparent lack of national strategy to really leverage that for economic gain. And so with that key challenge, clearly what came out of it is that we need to develop an ecosystem. We need to develop a shared vision and a community framework and a plan. So ultimately, that's what we're doing. There's clear consensus that we need a national AIoT ecosystem, and AIoT Canada is taking the lead in developing that strategy, and we've established a National Strategy Council to guide that development. And lastly, what I want to leave you with is that a robust AIoT ecosystem is a prerequisite for automated freight advancement and adoption in Canada. It's one of the main pillars to make it all happen. And I would suggest that we also need an ecosystem in freight, automated freight, which not only includes AIoT, but a bunch of other facets as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. And as an add-on, as you know, I attended the roundtable you had this spring, and that was excellent, very well attended, lots of good ideas on the table, and lots of good conversations. It was wonderful. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
no, thank you, Walter. Next, I want to introduce Abraham Sir. He was, interestingly, educated in Colombia and France. He is an automation process engineer at Canada Post, and he's going to be talking to us about the national automation strategy at Canada Post. Abraham, over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. I'm going to start sharing my screen. There you go. Hoping that you can see it now.
Yes, we can.
All right. So I wanna switch gears for a minute, and I'm going to share a use case actually that we have at Canada Post where we're using indoor automated vehicles in our to move forward in our transformation strategy. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to try to draw parallels between automated freight and what we're doing with indoor automated vehicles. So first of all, a little bit of information about Canada Post really quick. Canada Post is a household name. Everybody knows what we are and what we do. We have more than 68,000 employees, and we have a fleet of over 14,000 vehicles. So that is big. And that's why Canada Post considers themselves a leader in the logistics industry. And we're trying to push forward every day with new ideas, innovation, and diving into new things to improve our service to Canadians. Automated vehicles fits into the capacity expansion category at Canada Post, and that's something really key that I wanna talk about, because the objective of the automated vehicles, and there's a lot of conversation when you talk about automation and automated vehicles. There's a lot of conversation about jobs, and there's a sentiment about it, and employees are hesitant because they think they're going to lose their jobs. But really, echoing Bob's comments about the shortage of labor and how hard it is to staff positions, the way Canada Post sees AGVs is to supplement that workforce and to build a base where we can use the vehicles to move material handling in the facility, and we can supplement with employees, really. So it's basically helping employees in the facility to move material. So when we talk about AGVs in our context here, we're talking about indoor vehicles, so automated forklifts. You can see a picture of one of the vehicles on the screen. And how we're using the vehicles is really interesting, because we're targeting long haul material handling. So, and again, to draw a parallel between automated freight, there's that conversation where you could use the trailer, the tractor trailer, to cover the long distance, the long haul, and somebody puts it on the highway and somebody takes it off remotely. Well, that's similar to what we're doing. We're selecting those long haul runs of material handling within our facilities to leverage the automated vehicles. In this one, I'm going to share two really quick videos of what they look like in our facility. It's a standard forklift that we've retrofitted with the help of a vendor, Daifuku, to move material handling in the facility. And we have an HMI at the top of the screen that employees use to call the AGV and tell it where to deliver the material. So it's kind of a hybrid, right? We still have work for the employees, and they use their knowledge to direct the vehicles, and the vehicles are doing the movement of the material in the facility. So it's really a hybrid, and the vehicles are a tool for employees to work faster and better and be more productive. Safety features. This is really interesting, because this is key, right? We need to make sure that the vehicles are safe, and it plays into the optics of everyone. We went above and beyond to make sure that the vehicles have a multitude of sensors that cover. Basically, we created a bubble around the vehicle to make it safe, and so that we're confident with these vehicles running in our facility. And this is my last one. Employee engagement and collaboration is really key. For us, this is a people change. The AGV technology, as in automated forklifts, is really not new in the logistics industry. It's been growing and developing for years, but it's just that perception, right? We need to convince people that the vehicles are safe, that they're here to help you, and they're here to stay. There's no path forward where automation is not playing a key role in the logistics industry. So that is my presentation, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Abraham. Interestingly, I used to know Canada Post fairly well for a bunch of reasons, and they've dropped off my radar screen in the last few years. So I found that update very, very interesting, and you guys are doing a lot more than I realized, and we'll have to stay in touch. So thank you, Abraham.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, finally, in this panel session on the Canadian activities, I just want to say a few words myself. As I mentioned, we, CAVTO, advise public and private sector organizations on preparing for the CAV era. Similar to what some of the previous speakers have mentioned, we in Canada do not have a cold start in this area. There's a number of different projects already happening. And I want to take just a few short minutes to list half a dozen projects that are ongoing in this space. There was a question in the Q&A about platooning. And there's a couple of platooning projects I want to mention. One is the Alberta Motor Transport Association has been conducting a platooning project between Calgary and Edmonton with some funding from Transport Canada. And there's also FP Innovation, which is in the forestry business, and they've also been working on platooning for forestry applications. And really, platooning is important. It's not full automation, but it's a step in the right direction. It allows you to move more material and with the same amount of labor as you need for one truck. In Toronto, a third one I want to mention is there's been quite a bit of work in sidewalk robots. And these are a small robot. You may have seen pictures that go along the sidewalk to deliver groceries or whatever. Those pilot projects like Jeffrey and Tiny Mile are now on hold. The hold has been mandated by the City of Toronto. They really want to put more of a governance structure on these rather than having them going and potentially causing some issues. So I believe we'll see them come back at one point in the future, in the fullness of time. But the innovation is going on, and we just need to figure out how to manage them. And that's a segue into some of the work, excellent work being done by Bern Grusch. He has assembled a global working group developing a new international standard called ISO 4448. And Bern's work is to develop an overall traffic management system for sidewalks, both for vehicles going along the sidewalk and also between the curbside and a building. Potentially in the future, that curbside, that sidewalk could be very busy. You have to think about all sorts of issues. The devil is really in the details, but Bern and his group, which I'm part of, is doing some really wonderful work there. Another thing which is happening in Toronto is middle mile. You heard earlier about long haul automated vehicles, and there's also, I just mentioned, sidewalk delivery for the last mile. There's also a pilot project for middle mile involving Loblaws and Gatic, a fairly well-known company in the space. They have been doing a pilot project for middle mile between a warehouse and a store since 2020. But yesterday, and this is brand new news, yesterday, Loblaws and Gatic announced that they were migrating that into a full-fledged commercial service to take groceries between a fulfillment center and a PC Express outlet where people get their groceries. And what's really interesting for us in Canada is that these vehicles will be fully automated. There will be nobody in the driver's seat, and this will be a service on roads, on regular roads in Toronto. So if you see a Loblaws Gatic vehicle with nobody, no driver, that's what this is all about. Initially, there will be a chaperone in the passenger seat who cannot drive, but has a big red emergency button for an emergency stop if needed. It's a big step forward, and certainly congratulations to Loblaws and Gatic for that. And finally, Wabi is been around for a year or two now, doing a lot of really wonderful innovation work in artificial intelligence and self-driving vehicles, with a strong focus on the rapid and safe deployment of their technology in logistics applications. I think each of those projects could easily have been a whole presentation unto itself, but we don't have time in this webinar for that, but that's just a taste, and hopefully at some point in the future we can bring people in to talk in more detail about that. That's really what I wanted to mention in terms of some of these projects, and we've got a few minutes left in this segment, so I'm going to just go through some of the questions here and see what questions we could answer. Interesting one, Abraham, for you. I mean, labor issues always come up, and there's a question here, but how does Canada Post's AGV initiatives meet with the union? How happy or unhappy are they? Can you talk to that?
Well, it's really a collaboration effort, right? One of the main things is in that collaboration is keep them informed. We actually started with a pilot project 2-3 years ago that I led myself, and we involved the union in that pilot project, right? We took their input, we made them an active partner in that pilot project, and we explained the objective, right? The objective in this case is to move long haul and to take those material handling activities that require long haul activities. And we're going to keep the employees where we need them the most, which is doing those more complex tasks, right? Loading and unloading trucks, stacking and unstacking, racking, doing that type of activities. And we just use the AGVs to move material to long distances, and we free up that time for the employee to do more meaningful activities. So, and like I said, it's not about cutting jobs or anything like that. It's about supplementing our workforce. And as we all know, it's getting increasingly harder to staff positions in the logistics industry, right? So we really need the help, and we see it as a tool that employees can use.
Right. Great. Thanks, Abraham. Got another question here, which is a very good question. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name, but he's connecting from Zimbabwe. And his question is, how best can we use systems thinking approach when they do not have the hard and soft infrastructure in their ecosystems? Anybody would like to take a stab at that? Nope. Okay. Let's pass on then, move on. Is there another question? Is there value changing migrate the change cycle to semi-automated devices, trains, and so on, with personnel managing a portion of the operation first before full automation? So going to a semi-automated approach first. Is there a benefit in this? Any thoughts there, Ray?
Well, it's always good to be thinking long-term in terms of what you obviously like to achieve, but you have to take it step by step. In most cases, we've got more technology right now than what we know how to use. And so it's just a matter of, yeah, and each solution is unique. So it's a matter of applying it to and making progress, and not putting barriers in place that it's going to keep you from taking subsequent steps.
Okay, that's great. One final question before we move on. A friend and colleague says many billions of dollars have been invested in developing autonomous trucks by US and European companies. When do we realistically expect to see commercial deployment of driverless trucks on public roads? The simple answer to me Ahmed, is today. I mean, the Loblaws Gazette announcement is a start. It's a small step, granted. It's not widespread deployment. It's a start, and it's going to grow from there, obviously, over a number of years. It's not going to be a light switch moment, so it'll be a gradual ramp up as we move forward with that. But that, the era of automated trucking has started. And next time we talk, Ahmed, we can talk about that in more detail. Okay, I'm going to move on now. So thank you to all the speakers in that panel, Bob, Walter, and Abraham. And I want to move on to the international segment. And as I mentioned at the start, I'm very pleased that we've got a couple of guest speakers. The first one is from the UK, Mark Cracknell. He's the program director for CAM with Zenzik UK. He's got a wonderful statement on his LA profile. He says he supports a joined up UK CAM supply chain. And his title is, as you see here, How the UK is Collaborating to Drive the Future of Freight. Mark, thank you for being here, and over to you.
Thank you, Barry, and a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you all this afternoon. My name, as Barry says, is Mark Cracknell. I'm the Programme Director of Connected and Automated Mobility at Zenzik. Probably worth starting off by explaining a little bit about who Zenzik are. So we are a not-for-profit organisation which is funded both by the UK government but also our industry partners. And our role, somewhat similar to the CAVCO role, is about bringing together the connected and automated mobility ecosystem and championing that here in the UK. So really our role is to sit in between government, industry and academia to bring together, to enable conversations, to provide a base understanding of insight or intelligence around what this new emerging ecosystem means, where the opportunities are. We deliver targeted innovation projects, specifically supporting SMEs and small companies to help them scale up products to market, but also look to support creating a supply chain here in the UK and supporting early deployments of connected automated mobility into real service. And primarily we do that through collaboration. So one of the things that we recognise as we talk around the world and visit others who are working in this space is that what the UK does exceptionally well is collaborate. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today is hopefully to open up some opportunities to collaborate with you. So if you're interested in that, please do reach out to us. A little bit about the policy in the UK, where we're at, what the landscape looks like, and some of the work that we've been doing over the last 5 years. So UK government has been taking a three-pronged approach to enabling CAM in the UK. The first is really a front-running position, recognising that the UK has an open regulatory approach when it comes to testing, trialling and deploying CAM on UK roads. Despite having road laws that go back to 1875 and the same rules that mean you can't drive your sheep up the road with a stick is the same reason you can't necessarily ride your bicycle on the pavement. Despite having laws that old, actually the UK regulatory landscape is open. You are able to test self-driving vehicles on the road, on public roads in the UK today. The UK government has been doing a lot of work over the last 3 years, and the Law Commissions of England and Scotland and the Law Commissions of Wales did a review of the UK legal position and made some recommendations to government of the laws which would need to be changed such that you can remove the human element requirement around having a driver in a vehicle. So lots going on in the regulatory and legislative landscape. The UK government also invested heavily alongside industry in 2 key proposition areas. The first is around a test infrastructure, recognising the UK has capability there, and that in order to ensure that the deployment of CAM is safe and resilient, we need to make sure that we can test those products robustly. The second was to co-invest in collaborative research and development projects. So UK government invested alongside industry in over 90 projects to date, which have tested and trialed and seeded a huge amount of great capability here in the UK. A diagram on the left there that probably you can't read the text of, but essentially what we demonstrate in this wheel that is out of those 90 plus projects which have been delivered over the last 5 years, we cut across lots of different areas of the supply chain, lots of different technology areas, lots of different use cases, public road, off-road, depot-based, and moving people, moving goods. On the right here, we have a picture of what we call CAM Testbed UK. So this is the world-leading UK-based testing capability, which is spread across 6 sites between Birmingham and Coventry in the Midlands, down to London there in the southeast. And a collection of test beds which can deliver public road, private road, and virtual testing in all sorts of environments, which allows organisations to develop their technology and push it towards market, ensuring at the very heart of it all that these technologies can be proven and demonstrably safe. So a lot of work been going along over the last 5 years in this space. The UK also has a vision for the future. So Zenzik led a piece of work back in 2018 to define a roadmap out to 2030 and a collective vision that was subscribed to by over 200 organisations here in the UK. Essentially, we set ourselves an aspirational goal that by 2030, we can see CAM being deployed in such a way that we ensure that we have an increasingly safe and secure road network. We've improved both personal and industrial productivity, and we have a greater access to transport for all. And all of that is underpinned and delivered by next generation services and technology, which are built and designed here in the UK using our high value skills, and we have a strong supply chain. So the UK has set out a vision and set out a path to achieving that vision. The roadmap itself is very comprehensive, and as you can see from this diagram, cuts across multiple themes, and we've heard previous speakers talk about this super ecosystem and the need to cut across different technology verticals and different domains. We recognise that there's a strong element of legislative work that needs to be done and a people-centric approach that's needed at the top there. We recognise that both the vehicles and the infrastructure need to provide technology that can unlock the challenges and the problems that we see in the transport network, but also that this technology has to be deployed into service. And we see that there are 3 key opportunity areas for the deployment of this technology: personal mobility, which pre-pandemic we would have been talking about robo-taxis a lot more, but what's been becoming apparent to us and the work that we've been doing is over the last 18 to 24 months, the opportunity for freight and logistic deployments has risen to the top, and we're seeing a significant increase in investment into this place. So the UK has a vision, and we've been doing some work also to understand what the supply chain of connected and automated mobility looks like. So we carried out some research earlier this year in an attempt to define a standard framework of what a supply chain might look like when we talk about CAM. This is a very interesting piece of work in that it extends beyond the traditional automotive supply chain. And if you think about the traditional way that vehicles are built, we recognise that actually that supply chain does not, is not enabled and equipped to deliver this new mode of transport. We have to look much wider. We have to look into the use cases. We have to look into the infrastructure, the operators of fleets of these vehicles, and lots of other aspects around insurance and legislation. So we have a framework and also an emerging understanding of what it takes to build a supply chain which can deliver connected and automated mobility into operation, which is delivering true transport services. So a lot of work has been going on in this space to look at CAM more generally, but what I wanted to do is just perhaps give a 1 or 2 insights into how we see this technology could be deployed into freight and logistics, and a few examples of what we're seeing here today. So we have pulled from our roadmap some of the interesting, we call them golden threads. These are the routes through the roadmap. One of the ones that's particularly interesting that was highlighted back in 2018 as an opportunity area for how we can deploy this technology is around the automation of heavy freight. So it's what we would call the middle mile, it's the long distance, the freeway, the motorway, the highway movement of vehicles. So we recognise that last mile logistics is also a huge enabler, and that first mile around sort of depots and industrial parks is clearly also an opportunity area and a use case which can be delivered. But as we look at how you might automate sort of the heavy freight sector, we recognise that it's not just a vehicle centric route. We can see that having the right data standards, the right connectivity, the vehicle to vehicle technology, and in fact, the vehicle to infrastructure technology increasingly, we need to see how you can leverage that infrastructure technology aligned with the vehicle technology, which starts with driver assisted platooning trials, moves on to further trials of different vehicle types, getting into the heavier goods end, the larger vehicle types, in parallel with developing an infrastructure which can support platooning in this particular case, and an aspiration that by 2027 you would be able to see on UK roads that the platooning of vehicles could be delivered, probably in off-peak times, in times where the road network is less congested, but ultimately out by 2030 that you would regularly see this at all times on the trunk network in the UK. And in fact, in the UK, we've been carrying out some trials of platooning of HGVs on the UK roads last year. So if we look a little bit at the state of play of what the logistics sector looks like here in the UK, we've worked with our partner Logistics UK, and one of the things that is particularly interesting is that the freight and logistics sector in the UK is quite fragmented. There are a few big players, the likes of Royal Mail, Amazon, DPD, DHL, and some of the usual suspects who have very large fleets, lots and lots of vehicles. But most of the network and most of the freight and logistics sector is built up of small operators who may have single-digit vehicles in their fleets. This presents a particularly interesting challenge if you look to scale out autonomy. Clearly, the big investment can't come from the small players, and so we're very much working with the larger players who have the ability to innovate and invest in the technology with the expectation that technology can then move throughout the rest of the freight network. As I said before, one of the things that is particularly interesting over the last 18 months is the traction that we're seeing and the investment coming into freight and logistics as a sector for the deployment of CAM technologies and products. So a few examples of UK-based organisations who are partnering with logistics providers. We see companies like Street Drone partnering both with Nissan and the movement of using automated tug vehicles to move just-in-time tier 1 parts onto the production line at their manufacturing plant up in Sunderland, but also Street Drone partnering for last mile delivery with the likes of Wilko to do last mile grocery delivery. We're seeing Oxbotica partnering with Ocado, one of the leading sort of technology providers around online grocery delivery, and partnering with them and in fact demonstrated their first autonomous vehicle grocery delivery way back in 2018 and continuing to scale that up. And in fact, Oxbotica delivered the first zero occupancy automated vehicle on the road in Europe earlier this year. So very much a leading light in the technology there, but very focused on the partnership with Ocado for last mile grocery delivery, but also a lot of construction and mining work there as well. And finally, Wave, another autonomous software stack provider, partnering with Asda in the UK to again see how they might do last mile fulfillment in that scenario. So there is lots of work happening in the UK. There are lots of challenges that we see that need to be overcome to ensure that we can deploy safely and securely But we are definitely seeing that the freight and logistics is the sector which has the opportunity to unlock the value chain of this technology. So thank you for your time. That's all that I had prepared today. Certainly happy at the appropriate moment to take any questions and definitely happy to collaborate. So please do reach out to us if you're interested in learning more. Barry, thank you.
Okay. No, thank you, Mark. That was wonderful. Exactly what I was expecting, and what you, the audience, don't know is that one of the things I did this spring was listen to a webinar from the UK with Mark from Zenzik, and also Logistics UK and CCAV, the Centre for Connected and Automated Vehicles. It was excellent. It went into a lot more detail than Mark was able to do in his 15 minutes, but it's wonderful, and definitely I think there's some opportunities here, some synergies between what you're doing and what we're doing, and look forward to staying in touch, Mark, and thank you. And next, I'm just looking, oh, there's David, yes. The next speaker is David Schaller. He's based in the US. His background is with Navistar and United Technologies. He is now the Director of Industry Engagement for the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. And the title of his presentation is Driving Towards Autonomous Commercial Trucks. Dave, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Barry, and welcome to everybody on here. NACFE is excited to be with you today. I'm sorry I'm at a hotel, so I'm having my slides run remotely. My Wi-Fi is not good here. Next slide, please. NACFE is an unbiased, fuel-agnostic nonprofit organization with a mission to double freight efficiency. Much of the times we talk about what we can do for ton miles per gallon or miles per gallon use of fuel, but that doesn't mean we aren't doing other things, and autonomous vehicles are amongst those. So we've been doing a lot of different things over the past 12 years, but something we're certainly focused on now is guiding future change. And our materials are all available free of charge at nacfe.org or runonless.com. Next slide, please. The reason all this information is free is that we're sponsored by numerous organizations in the transportation industry across the US and Canada. So all of the things I'm going to mention to you today are yours to access at no charge. Next slide, please. The automated trucks that we're talking about today come in a series of growth of automated technologies, platooning, assisted driving, leading toward fully autonomous vehicles with several different SAE levels of automation. But what we're also seeing is a tech growth amongst common fleets with the enabling building blocks that move toward autonomous trucks, including automated transmissions, collision mitigation systems, active lane keeping, camera systems of all varieties that keep growing, telematics, tire pressure monitoring. The good news is the more fleets adopt all these technologies, and many leading fleets already are, they're setting the ground in place to build upon for autonomous vehicles. Next slide, please. As we look at why fleets are looking for autonomous vehicles, predominantly here in the people factor, we've got a phenomenal parking shortage for tractor trailers. We've got a terrible driver supply versus demand. Fleets are really struggling to staff all the trucks they'd like to have running. There are constant challenges in hours of service, which basically, for the most part, go away with an autonomous vehicle. The challenges of training drivers, drug testing, aging drivers, leaving the industry, salaries, benefits, but we look at other things too. Nuclear verdicts for accidents and whatnot, driving fleets costs way up. And at the same time, there's a growing demand for freight across the marketplace, as we've been talking about. So there are just a lot of different factors that are really pushing hard, and large fleets are certainly looking at this with, hey, I think this might help me with a lot of my significant problems. Did we jump ahead one slide or two there? Okay, I'll talk to this. Okay, next slide, please. A lot of people, when we talk about autonomy and trucks, have one particular method in mind. Oops, go back, please. When we get back to the last
Oh,
slide.
sorry about
Well,
that. I'm
that's
just
okay.
trying to make it as a full screen here.
Okay,
It all worked.
it's
Thank you.
good. A lot of fleets and a lot of people have one particular methodology in mind on how automated trucks work, when in fact there are a lot of different models that different companies are working with. That some have a cooperative adaptive cruise control with platooning, some have human drone platooning, some are looking at exit-to-exit autonomous trucks and then using drone operation. Let me give you an example. We are already capable of flying drones in military operations in 3 dimensions on different continents, driving a truck in 2 dimensions so that once it leaves the interstate, someone in a cubicle with what looks essentially like a driver training machine setup could drive the truck to the distribution center or wherever. There are scenarios number 4 that are similar to all of you that fly in airplanes. You've got a pilot in the cockpit, but they're still using autopilot. So there are a lot of different types of methodologies being looked at for autonomous trucking. And I recommend this report by Steve Vicelli, Autonomous Trucks and the Future of the American Trucker. Now, it's been a few years since it was published, but if you're interested in potential labor impacts and whatnot, that's partially why this paper was written. So the hot link is there when these things come out, or you can drop me a line when you see my email here at the end. Next slide, please. Where we're at in the US and Canada is, next slide, please. Other way. Where we're at in the US and Canada is we have numerous technology providers now that are already out there working on this. Too Simple, Torque Robotics, Embark, Locomation, Outrider, Kodiak, Neuro, Gatic, Gussen, Plus, Aurora, Waymo, Solo, Enride. They all have phenomenal teams, venture capitalists. Many of them have partnerships with major OEMs. And there are certainly others that aren't on here because the OEMs themselves are working on it, not just the Daimler, Freightliner, Navistar type folks, but we've got people that are new to the truck industry, supposedly joining soon, like Tesla, that certainly know about a lot about autonomous operation. So in my opinion, it's just personal opinion, it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. We've already had 1 or 2 companies that aren't on here drop off. But it only takes a couple of these to be successful to make a significant change in our industry. Next slide, please. As NACFE is working on this, we have a series of 39 blogs already by Jack Roberts and Mike Roth that dive into autonomous trucks. So if you go to NACFE.org, you can go to our autonomy section that's linked on this slide and see many of the different types of things we're already looking into: insurance, law enforcement, different types of partnerships and things that are going on as this industry changes, things that we have to consider because it's going to be a very different mode of operation. If you will, today we're limited by hours of service and the driver or drivers in the vehicle. In the future, we're looking at a vehicle that theoretically, for its best return on investment, wants to operate 24/7. And with all the work going on in alternative fuels, we get doubly challenged now. Will these trucks be battery electric? Will they continue to be diesel like the test trucks are now? Will they be hydrogen fuel cells? There's a lot of different things that come into play. One of the advantages we have at NACFE is an unbiased nonprofit. We can share both the positives and the negative, the benefits and the challenges as we look forward as an organization. Next slide, please. As I present out in the industry, it's not unusual to have people that don't like autonomous vehicles. They're uncomfortable with the very thought. So I've stolen this from a state law enforcement officer, that there are a lot of dangerous vehicles out there in the real world on the roads. And many of those dangerous situations all start with a letter D. We have drunk drivers, drug drivers, distracted, drowsy, disoriented, dining, decorating, disgruntled, dog, declining reflexes. Even my sister works at a retirement home, dementia. And last but not least, the officer said dumb. And we just want you to know autonomous vehicles don't have any of these issues. So a lot of the things that are causing accidents today can go away as we go toward autonomous vehicles. Next slide, please. I also want you to know that NACFE studies the adoption of new technologies by truck fleets in depth. Here are 85 different technologies. No, you can't understand all of this. It's a total spaghetti chart. But what I just want to share with you is that no singular technology goes from 0% to 100% adoption in under a decade. There's just simply no history of that. And it doesn't make sense to all fleets for all the different applications they run. So this is an annual report we put out to help people understand what do adoption look like in the commercial freight industry. So it's really helpful to know this isn't going to suddenly take over and displace all truck drivers. That just simply can't happen. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to encourage you that if you're intrigued by what we're doing, there are many different ways you can stay in touch with us. You can scan my digital head there and connect with me. You can send me an email. You can follow us on any of many different social medias. For us, LinkedIn is by far the best business-to-business conversation, but there's a lot of different ways you can work with us. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah. David, thank you very much indeed. And I do remember that you are time sharing today. You're at a conference somewhere. And so I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us. That was really wonderful. I learned a lot. And I've got a question really from the question box here, really for both of you, Mark and Dave. Oh, we can see you, Dave. And the question is to Dave and Mark, how do you two view drone technology being introduced into the supply chain on a larger scale than we currently see? What do you think?
Did you say drone?
Yes, I did.
Well, it depends on whether you're referring to drone as the truck in drone mode, or the drone as more of us think that's a small helicopter type of device. In freight delivery, there's already people testing drone deliveries, and that doesn't necessarily, a lot of people think that means 100% of the packages are being sent by a drone, and that's not the case. If you can envision an e-commerce delivery truck that has one house that's back on a cul-de-sac, and it can have a drone deliver to there while it's doing the main drive, it can improve the efficiency of the e-commerce delivery operation. One of the significant challenges that there's simply no way we can outlaw is that eagles and hawks and other things don't like drones and are more than willing to take them down because they see them as intruders. So there's very little that you can do to make birds of prey respect drones, but I'm sure we'll figure out more as we move forward.
Yeah. Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think maybe not quite so qualified to talk about introducing it into the Canadian supply chain, but a UK perspective here. One of the things that's interesting, certainly from a UK point of view, is that at the moment, cities and regions have control of their own road networks, whereas the airspace is centrally controlled by the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK. So as you start to think about how you might integrate airspace into a transport network, it completely changes the paradigm of how things are licensed and controlled. So, for example, in London, there are lots of licensing, permits and schemes in place for freight movements around London and restrictions about nighttime deliveries, etc., in dense urban environments. How you would need to change looking at that for taking the airspace into account, I think is a very big challenge. So at the moment, as Dave says, we're seeing some small trials happening in various places, and in Coventry, a new airport there, specifically looking at kind of light aircraft and drone capability, is being put as place as a proof of concept. But I think it brings a lot of challenges in the operational aspect of it. I think the technology, I think, probably is certainly achievable, but it's the operational control aspects that, from a UK perspective, currently are proving a challenge.
One additional thought is, about 2 weeks ago, I saw my first ever demonstration of a GPS-enabled parachute for drones drop-in packages, and they had a GPS sensor on the package, which could, in fact, through controls, pull the strings on the parachute and guide it to the designated drop zone. Within the demonstration I saw was within a couple of meters, and it's a way to deliver by drone without having to actually make the drone land. So that's very impressive. Okay, I'm going to say thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dave. It's always wonderful to get an international perspective, and you both provided that. So thank you very much, and definitely we'll stay in touch as we move ahead. And I do have another question, Mark, but I'll just email it to you. So thank you both. Okay, we're going to move on to the final segment here, and I'm going to ask my co-presenters to come back on. So on this panel section, it'll be Bob Armstrong from Siltner, who's there, Yannicka van der Zee, who is with ITS Canada, Ray Barton, who is there, and also Walter Knittel with Traxium and AIoT Canada. And what we want to do is just have a conversation here about where do we go from here in Canada, really. And it's a focus on the future, given what we've heard so far. My first question is, from what we've heard, a lot more work is needed in this area. And how can we in the private sector help create the ecosystem, the synergies, and the initiatives to move forward more quickly with this? Walter, can you start us off, please?
Yes, I think it's really a case of cross-pollination, right, among the different constituencies, freight operators, service operators, key technology providers, whether it's AI, IoT, 5G, or actually trucking, and the end users themselves. So I think we need to pull together and participate in actual organizations that are at the forefront of promoting ecosystems around these technologies, and so that we can together help influence public policy around it, and have government on board as well to facilitate some of this work.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on what the private sector can do? No, okay. Well, let's move. Thank you, Walter. Let's move from there to the government side. Most of us, not all of us, know about the Federal Minister of Transport's National Supply Chain Task Force, and that's an ongoing process. There's also the roles for the provincial, territorial, municipal governments, and they all are very important stakeholders in this. What can they do? What can we do to help them? Bob, over to you to start this conversation.
Okay, thank you. As you know, I was appointed by the minister. I served on the National Supply Chain Task Force. There were 6 of us and 2 co-chairs, and we finished our report and recommendations. We're about a day or 2 early. That's why I couldn't say too much about supply chain earlier, Barry, but we're in Ottawa tomorrow for a press release. And then hopefully sometime this week, the minister will make formal announcements on his tour across Canada. But not only do you have the Minister of Transportation involved in the supply chain, but a key role is played by the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Industry. After all, they look after digitization, automation, the Competition Bureau. And then there's other government agencies as well, federal agencies like the Minister of International Trade, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the CBSA, the CFA. Then you have your provincial governments, and even in some cases, local governments. And all I can tell you is, when you read our report and recommendations, it takes that in, this isn't over. The reality is we need to develop a national supply chain strategy. That would nothing's going to happen if we don't do that. So that's the importance. So government plays a key role, but so do us in industry. You know, we interviewed and met with 160 companies and associations across Canada to get their views. So what we heard, we developed our report.
Thank you, Bob. So appreciate that. Anybody else want to add to what Bob said?
I might just add a few points. Oh, sorry. Walter, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I would just say, I think that's bang on, Bob, but I would also say that within government, there needs to be, we need to elevate level of digital literacy among the public servants, among the policymakers. And I'm not really talking about like the deep dive into technology, but to a level where they acquire a certain level of technological intuition, if you will, so they can translate that into policy. So I think some digital literacy training and education is probably a good thing to have within the government.
Thank you. Was it you, Shannon, wanted to say something?
Yeah, I actually, it was so well timed, Walter, because I think the digital literacy part is so important. And working with so many transportation companies across North America, I think the autonomous journey we're on is great, but it's like giving somebody a Ferrari before you teach them how to drive. There's a lot of foundational work that we need to do in building skill and talent within the industry, attracting people that have that technological prowess, that understand how to use the information. You know, we can automate perhaps the movement of goods, but there's so many other pieces and facets of the movement of goods that frankly needs a digital strategy and a supply chain strategy, as Bob mentioned. So I think there's a Lego block set that needs to be built and constructed here. It needs to be pieced together, and I am really anxious to see the report when it's available, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. I'm also very interested to see what can we as a group or an expanded group do in the future. What specific activities could we get involved in to help expedite and advocate for this super ecosystem? Yannicka, any thoughts here?
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for this very rich conversation that we're having here today. And I had prepared an answer, and my answer was a national roundtable led by Transport Canada. But there's also other, like one of the audience members said, what about a national single window, for example? So it's important that we bring all stakeholders together. We find synergies with other sectors. This requires, however, a holistic digital strategy to be built on a supportive ecosystem. The way forward is de-silification, as the CEO of Erdico recently said in LA. We can deliver transformation, but we need to transform our thinking, our policies, and our regulatory framework. Like a colleague said, if you do what you've always have done, you'll get what you've always got. And I just wanted to say a few observations as I've been listening to when Shannon talked a little bit about the traditional bill of lading. Just an interesting point. According to the Digital Container Shipping Association, the global container shipping industry could save up to $4 billion every year if half of all bills of lading were dealt with in electronic format. And I think we've talked also a little bit about the tremendous impacts that automation, digitalization has on our workforce. In particular, for example, zero emission vehicles. What does that do, for example, to the ITS workforce? And that's a different conversation as we can be held. So instead of a national roundtable that I thought, I would say that a summit or a conference next year is something that we should look at. Based on even the conversations that we've heard today, there's much education and much for all of us to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannicka. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Nope. Ray, I see you talking, but I can't hear you.
Sorry. Okay, I'd just like to make the point that we need more, let's say, applied scientists and people who understand the technology as input at the senior policy level. They need to be sitting at the table when these decisions are being made. We can't let all this technology be directed by people who have no understanding, who are lawyers, accountants. Nothing wrong with that, but they need input from people who really understand the technology, because it's changing fast, and you can't expect them to have all the understanding in terms of, and if we don't put that focus in terms of the technology, our country is going to be outpaced by other countries. So we have to appreciate how much the solutions in terms of using the technology contributes to our economy, and in fact, the income and the salaries that workers can make.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Okay, I'm going to start to wrap things up. First of all, to the audience, I want to say thank you for attending and watching and listening. And also, we would love to have your inputs. And, to what extent do you agree with what we've been talking about? The chat box has a link. You see it now in the chat box. It's a link for a survey with 4 questions. It should take you no more than 2 minutes, maybe as little as 1 minute. Who knows? But that will, in fact, help us to plan the future. So please help us by going through that survey. Thank you for attending. And I also want to mention that everybody who registered, whether they attended or not, will get a link to a recording of this webinar. A big thank you to my co-organizers, AIoT Canada, ITS Canada, Siltner, and Vitesse. A special thank you again to Walter and his company Praxium for joining with CAVCO in sponsoring this. A big thank you to all of our speakers, and a big thank you to Siltner for hosting this webinar, and to Rebecca and Rafa for all their work behind the scenes. We could not do this without you. So from me, thank you all, goodbye, and back to you, Bob.
Oh, thank you, Barry, and thank you, everybody. This is, I think, been a very informative webinar, and I think it's really opened a dialogue to do more. And so I want to thank everybody for being here today, for your questions. We'll make sure you get the answers that you wouldn't have got today because we ran out of time. We tried to cover a lot of ground, and I think everybody did a great job. And certainly want to thank CAVCO and Praxium for the sponsorship, and all the other organizations. I think it's the first time. I like the idea that Yannicka raised about collaboration and things like this. This is how the only way we're going to get things done is to work together on this and to do more of what we just did together, and because we've had some interesting speakers, and I'm one who firmly believes Canada has to move forward, and we're falling behind again, and we always seem to be playing catch up, and yet we have a lot of innovation in this country. We have a lot of expertise. It's time to put that expertise to work right here at home, and so I look forward to again working with all of you. And to everyone who attended, thank you very much. And I hope you all have a great day.